Welcome, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Kuzma. I'm the program director here at Global Cleveland, and we are sponsors for Welcome Strangers, the Cleveland International Film Festival short. This is the 45th year of the incredible film festival that we have the honor of hosting here in Cleveland, Ohio. We are here today with Sokol Savage, who is the producer of this film. We have Sarah Jackson, who is the head of Casa de Paz in Colorado. We have Sister Rita Mary Harwood from the Diocese of Cleveland here. And we have Masha Teverosky from Us Together. So thank you everyone who has seen the film already. If you have not seen the film, we encourage you after this conversation to watch the short. It is a short film, so it is just under a half an hour. And I'd like to start us off today. First of all, just thank you, Film Festival, for the incredible selection of films that you've brought us this year and for working with us and with the film community during the pandemic to make sure people still have access to the festival. And thank you, Cleveland, for your support. And I'd like to start off by asking our four panelists here to talk about how they came to immigration in their personal and professional lives. So I'd like to start with Sarah, in fact, our distinguished guest.
Hi, everyone. I kind of like to joke that this was a complete accident for me. I wasn't really planning on devoting a lot of my time or attention to the immigration conversation. I actually was invited to go down to the Mexico-US border to learn about immigration, and I said yes, because it was an all expenses paid trip to Mexico. And I thought, I could use a vacation, right? I seriously saw myself on the beach with a pina colada, having a vacation. And I just thought, oh, maybe I'll learn some interesting things here and there. But clearly that trip changed my life, because for the first time, what I witnessed was families being separated by our immigration policies. And I had lunch with a father who had just been deported and separated from his 3 children. And I met asylum seekers fleeing danger from their home countries and coming to the United States seeking safety. And it changed my life, because I was imagining myself in their shoes or my family in their shoes. And I asked myself the question, would I want to be treated this way if this was me? And every single experience that I had along the border, I thought, absolutely not. There's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to treat people. And that led me on this journey. When I returned back from that trip, I just started learning as much as I could about immigration and specifically immigrant detention. And then I realized there was a little gap in the Denver area. And I thought, well, this is a small thing that I can do, is to provide hospitality for immigrants leaving the detention center. And 9 years later, well, we're still going strong.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dia, could we, in the film business, what brought you to sort of making a film like this?
Yes, I'll also just say thank you so much to Global Cleveland and my fellow panelists and the film festival. This is a true pleasure, even though I wish we were all together in person. It's great to have this conversation. I am a filmmaker. I've been working in film and television for 20 years, basically, and done a lot of different kinds of things. And my day job is that I am a TV producer I run a show on MTV about pregnant teenagers. So, my method of activism in the world and trying to change things is definitely through trying to capture them on film and sort of spread the word and shine a light on issues and hope that it will get people to think about things differently. And I first heard about Sarah and Oliver and the volunteers at Casa de Paz the summer of 2018, when Trump's zero tolerance immigration policy was put into effect, which was, the very cruel, seeing these kind of headlines and people, children being ripped out of their parents' arms. And I was, just distraught and miserable and wondering what I could do. And my mom and stepmom went to a training at Casa de Paz, and I was talking to my mom one night. She said, "Oh my gosh, I have to tell you this really cool thing that I did." And I just was immediately intrigued. And, to be honest, I think, and I called up Sarah the next day, and I met her a few days later, and we spent months kind of developing a relationship and figuring out how to be able to work together, really to kind of profile what the kind of, things that she's doing in her home. And yeah, I just was really desperate, I think, for something that gave me some hope during that time. And I find her still very inspirational.
Thank you very much. Could we have Masha please go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Masha Teverosky. I'm Director of Development at Us Together and Interim Director of the Cleveland office. So I am an immigrant myself. So I came to the United States almost 25 years ago with as a refugee with my son, who was then at 2.5 years old. Now he speaks Russian with a big accent, but he still does. And, I can't say that it was my mission from the very beginning. It's just how life presented, to me, itself to me. So I went to school at Case Western Reserve. I got my master's in social work. And then it all happened. I started working in domestic violence field, helping immigrant women who are the victims. And then I moved to New York and worked for HIAS. HIAS is one of 9 national agencies that help refugees resettle here in the United States. So, but, very soon I realized that this is the field that I want to be, because I understand, I have been through this, and I just want to help. And it's a very bumpy road. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to have understanding of all the trauma and everything that had happened, to these people. And so here I am, and I think the main lesson is that, my grandmother used to say, whatever happened in life, she would say, you know what, anyone can be in the shoes of this person or that person. And if you look at this from this perspective, then you understand better and you have more compassion, you have more empathy. Because if you can imagine yourself in the shoes of refugees, then it's half work done.
Thank you, Masha. Sister Rita Mary, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity, and especially to Sarah and Dia for all the work they've done to bring this to our attention. I really appreciate that so much. I am a sister of Notre Dame, and in 1995, I was asked to join the bishop's staff for the Catholic community here in the Cleveland area. And all job descriptions have a list of what you have responsibility for. And so mine certainly did have that kind of a list. And one of them was for the pastoral care of migrants, refugees, and people on the move. That's an office that was established in Rome by the Pope in the year 1400, because he was concerned about those who were going out as explorers and traders, that they would have accompaniment in that journey and support. So that was the responsibility I assumed. And so it's for working with all of the diverse communities within the diocese. And in the year 2000, the U.S. bishops wrote a pastoral letter entitled like this, Welcoming the Stranger. And it really pointed out to the community, to people of faith, really, our responsibility to be here and to be with people who are coming into our communities. And so there was a training that took place in Wisconsin at that time, and a group of 10 of us from the Diocese of Cleveland went to really participate and to see how we might be able to to help. We came back afterwards and formed a committee called the Welcoming the Stranger Committee. How unique. And we have met, not all of us exactly the same people, but we have met for the last 21 years, every month, to talk about the refugee and the migrant community here in our area and how we as a faith community are here to be with them, to walk with them, to support them in any way that we might be able to do that. But also, I think we've got three main goals. One is education. That certainly is our responsibility to get out to our parishes and schools and agencies, et cetera, and tell the story, help people to become familiar with who is our community, who are we all together. And the second is advocacy, watching the legislation, watching and responding to that, having a voice for those that perhaps feel they don't have a voice. And the third is to really to be there for the needs. What are the needs of people, the real needs, for places to live, for language, for education, etc. So until 2005, the main emphasis of our work was with the refugee community. Migration and Refugee Services, which is a part of our Catholic Charities, was established right after the Second World War, and in order to welcome the refugees coming at that period of time. And ever since, it's been a wonderful organization in the diocese. And so we concentrated, and at that time we were having people coming from Herzegovina, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Around the year 2000, 2001, we began to get the young men from the Sudan, if you recall their story, and others coming from Africa. In 2005, the Conference of Bishops established an office in Washington at the same time that George Bush said, our immigration system is broken. And that office was established called Justice for Immigrants, particularly for the migrant community and to address the issues that became very apparent at that time. And so the work of our committee is very local. We're here to provide education, to provide advocacy, and to provide direct assistance to the migrant community. And it has been a really important ministry for us. Just to give you one example, a couple of years ago, we had 2 raids in our area, one in Salem and the other in the Sandusky area, and we went to help. And we realized at that time, we didn't know what we were doing. That was a new experience for us. We did not know what we were doing. We were there to help, and we certainly did help, but our helping wasn't too well structured or organized or whatever you want to call it. And so just recently, at the beginning of recently, we've worked on the development of a raid response committee for our area. And we're praying that we never need it. But if we do, we have a plan. We have a way to move forward, and that will be initiated on the 1st of May. So, and we have over 100 people who volunteered to help. And so that kind of looks at what have we been doing, what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for your incredible work, and 21 years meeting monthly. That's a goal for all of us.
Sure is.
Thank you. We had a couple of questions in the chat, and Sarah answered them directly, but I would like, just for the broader audience, because I'm not sure if everybody can see the questions, but one of the questions was, other than Casa de Paz, are there other Casa de Paz around the country, or is it just in Colorado?
Definitely not just in Colorado. I actually took the concept. I stole it. There is a hospitality home called El Refugio, which means the refuge, in Georgia. And they provide hospitality for families who are driving in from out of town to visit their loved ones who are locked up in the detention center. And when I came back from that first trip at the border, and I was trying to figure out what's my role here, how can I help? I found out about El Refugio, and I knew instantly that is exactly what I want to do. I want to open up a home, and I want to share it with people who are directly impacted by immigrant detention. but I didn't know how to make it happen or what steps I needed to take. And so I emailed the folks at El Refugio asking if I could come down for a short weekend to learn how they do what they do. And they said, absolutely, come down. And so I went and I observed, I hosted some families, and then I came back and did my best to copy and paste. And so it's interesting actually, because at El Refugio at that time, they only had hospitality for immigrants, for families who were driving in from out of town who had loved ones locked in detention. They did not have a post-release support program. And then I started the hospitality home for families in Colorado. That was the original mission. And then we started hosting folks released from the detention center as well. And now El Refugio has a post-release support program too. And we're not the only two organizations doing this work. There are about 20 different homes across the United States, whether they're individual homes or a shelter of some type or a network of homes hosting 1 or 2 people at a time. But in perspective, there are about 20 of the homes open for hospitality, and there are hundreds of detention centers. So not every detention center has a home like Casa de Paz near it. In fact, Oliver, who you meet in the film, he was originally detained at the Tijuana, Mexico border, or I'm sorry, Tijuana, San Diego border. And then from there, he was transferred to Arizona. And when he was at the detention center in Arizona, he actually prayed that God would not release him from that detention center because it is so remote that not even taxis will go and pick up people there. So he would have literally been wandering around the desert. Well, he ended up getting transferred from Arizona to Colorado, and that's where he was released. But every day there are immigrants released onto the streets of a foreign city with no one standing alongside them. And so, Madison, that was a great question. And if you're interested in starting a home like this, please reach out to me. I will tell you what not to do. I know all those answers.
So another question we have is, how long do people stay at Casa de Paz, and what's their transition like after? Like, what do they do when they leave Casa de Paz?
Everybody's story is different, obviously, but the majority of folks as we speak right now that come to Casa are maybe with only a few hours or even just one night. And that is because of COVID. Before COVID, we did not provide the plane tickets or the bus tickets for our guests, and their families would purchase them. And sometimes the families would need a few days to get the money together. But with COVID, we knew that the urgency to get from the detention center to home was a lot higher because of the pandemic and just needing to get home to be in a safe place to self-isolate. And so we started providing same-day plane tickets or bus tickets for all of our guests. But then obviously, you know, there are some days where it's just not possible. There's no more flights or buses for that day. But on average, you know, somebody might be with us one or two nights. And then the second part of the question, what do people typically do after their release? Some people have been released, like Oliver, you saw in the film, and he won his asylum case, and he can now apply for a work permit and a driver's license, and eventually, after a number of years, apply for a green card and citizenship. And so some people are in that situation. Other folks like Mirabelle, Oliver's wife, who you also meet in the film, she was released on immigration bond. And so that means that she paid $5,000 to be released, and she still has to show up to her next court appearance where the immigration judge will make the final determination on whether or not she can stay in the United States or she will be deported back to Cameroon. And kind of just in this limbo, right? Not really knowing, am I staying here or am I not? And even for folks who are in the situation like Oliver, right, where they're released from the detention center and they legally can stay in the United States for forever, essentially. the time right after detention is very precarious because it often takes months, if not years, to get your work permit, and you're not allowed to work for cash under the table. And so having a community of support is critical in the well-being and the ability for somebody to thrive, because imagine, right, you're in a foreign country, you have no ability to work, you're waiting for your work permit to come in, and how are you supposed to make a life, right? So a lot of folks that I met through the CASA are living in this state of limbo. Home isn't here. At home, they can't go back home. And that can obviously be incredibly stressful. And that's why I'm very grateful for our volunteers who stay in touch with our guests, because having somebody who knows them and cares about them can make a difference.
Thank you. Going off of that, I'd like to ask Sister Rita, in that limbo state, to maybe talk about a few, the three individuals from
Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso here in Cleveland.
As I was listening to Sarah, I was thinking about their story. We have three gentlemen who were in a village in Burkina Faso, which is in the central part of Africa. And one evening, the rebels came in and slaughtered all the members of that village community. And these three gentlemen, who did not know each other at the time, happened to be away either for work or visiting a family member, and I can't remember why the third one. So they came back to their village and found everyone dead, their families all killed. And so in fear, they were advised to get out because they weren't sure if the rebels would come back. They went all the way through Africa, worked for a period of time, and then got the money to leave Africa, and they went to Brazil in South America. Then traveled all the way through South America, through Central America to the border here between the United States and Mexico, and presented themselves then at the border asking for asylum. They were transferred because there were so many people coming up through the border. They were transferred to Youngstown, Ohio, which is about 45 miles east of us here in Cleveland. And fortunately, our legal services through Migration and Refugee Services were providing assistance, representation to people in the detention center in Youngstown. And so it was there that our lawyers met these three gentlemen, the only ones from Burkina Faso, of course. We haven't heard much about them at all. And as they listened to their story, they represented them before the immigration court and asked that a bond would be assigned to them. Now that's very important, and Sarah referred to that, because if they're left in detention, we have this process of expedited deportation. So if they're in detention, they would be deported much more quickly. If they can get a bond paid, they can go out and continue through the courts to apply for asylum. That sometimes will take, their first consideration will be a year or 2 years, or maybe even 3 years, because the courts are so overloaded with cases. So in this situation, each man was assigned a $15,000 bond. That meant, this is different from a civil bond. When a bond is assigned in the case of a person for immigration purposes, the whole bond has to be paid. Fortunately, here in the diocese, we had established a fund. A couple just really very generously made a fund for the assistance of migrants, And so I was able to contact them and see if it might be possible for us to provide the money to pay that bond so that those three men could come out and wait. So they did. and the bond was paid. And Forest City, or I'm sorry, Forest Hills, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Had been a church that was providing asylum for those who were seeking asylum during this time. And they had the space at their church. So they offered their church as a place for these gentlemen to live. And very similar to what you're saying. People from the community came forward from all different groups. Just in reflecting on what you had said, even during the film, people coming together to help and to be glad that they're able to do that. And so that's what's happened. In this interim, one of the men found that his children had escaped, and they were with relatives in another village. They were not killed. The people there at Forest Hills were able to connect them together. If you can just imagine the joy that must have been for those three gentlemen to see the children. When Peter and Rita, who are the ones that established our Immigrant Assistance Fund, realized that, Peter said to me, oh, as a father, he said, I can just imagine with them. Can we bring those children here? And so that's the story of that family. Forest Hills and all the people of the Cleveland Heights area are caring for them. They're doing well. They're learning English. They're in communication with those children left behind. And the process for asylum, they have continued through that process. It will take a while. A gentleman who they befriended at the jail in Youngstown at the detention center has come to join them, living kind of in the area. So community is formed around people like this. I think as we participate in experiences like this, it creates a community. It's a blessing, really. And thank God for that fund. That fund is used for bonds, for filing fees, which are very expensive. That whole process is a very expensive process. And for the immediate needs, we've been able to use that during this time for the migrant community who've been very affected by the COVID pandemic. So
thank you. We actually at Global Cleveland helped those three gentlemen get vaccinated here. So we were very glad they reached out to us.
yes.
As we're working with a lot of immigrants in the region to get vaccinated.
Mhm.
Masha, I'd like to ask you a question around welcoming and community support. Us Together is a wonderful resettlement agency, and asylees and refugees are sort of two sides of the same coin. And so from the refugee perspective and welcoming in that transition period, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how the community supports your families and the work that you are able to provide. Oh, Masha, you're muted, sorry.
I'm sorry, keep forgetting. Well, we are, people often ask us, how do refugees find you? And the answer usually, oh no, we find you. So the way it works is that the families are assigned to our agency. Us Together, we operate in 3 cities. We're the only statewide refugee resettlement agency in Ohio. And we are the ones who greet them at the airport. We find the place to live. We find the furniture, the food, enroll children in school. So that's all preordained by the federal program, which is called Reception and Placement. However, the services are only 90 days. So in 90 days, we need to help them get employed, or if they are not, as they call, employable, and I don't want to go into that, there is a whole story about it, but then we need to assist them with benefits, with disability, because the trauma is so deep that, we just start learning upon their arrival what these people have been through and how it affected their health. So that's 90 days. But we have a lot of programs that help, you know, in the long run, but the community is absolutely amazing. Two things. When pandemic hit, we had the best fundraising effort we ever had during holiday season. The major problem was with the kids when the remote learning started, right? And imagine a refugee kid with no language, the parents who are going out of their mind because they cannot help the kids. I mean, you want to help, but you cannot help the kids because you don't speak the language. And even if you speak the language, you have to understand how American school system works. Because in many cultures, for example, even when they are becoming adult, talking to a teacher the teacher is someone of the highest, you know, regard. It's not like here we can call the teacher, we can shoot them email, you know, that's the entire cultural learning going on. So, it's important to know that Us Together we host Vista members, Vista volunteers who are a tremendous help, and they're absolutely amazing young people. And one of our Vistas started working on the refugee youth remote learning program. So we recruited close to 35 mentors who worked with the kids online, or they would, when it was still warm, they would work with them on the porch or somewhere, you know, outside. We work very closely with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and with their multicultural department. So there are so many different things that work together, because we have our own in-house interpreting services, for example, which is one of the largest in the state. That's actually how Us Together started. We actually started as an interpreting service a long time ago in 2003. And now we have contracts with the hospitals. We're the only provider to the Cuyahoga Job and Family Services. So our interpreters were very much involved in this. So then when they started switching to hybrid learning, again, you know, and new volunteers would come on, you know, on board and help and tutor and, you know, help the parents figure this out, because the big part of this is the parents. So, you know, this is one of the examples. So the other is, we had unfortunate, you know, situation when one of our clients' mother passed away, and he absolutely had no funds or ways, you know, to organize a funeral. And, you know, our staff and communities and faith organizations like the churches, they helped him so much. It was absolutely in the height of the pandemic. It was, I think, sometime early spring last year or sometime around then. So that was another very touching moment, how the community, and honestly, I don't think that if it wasn't for the community, we would be able to provide the services that we now provide. And building the capacity, like Elizabeth knows that we're now talking with landlords, with different businesses. We have a refugee micro enterprise program, which is very successful. And this is amazing treasure of the talent, the skills, and business savviness among the refugees. So, and that's all is happening because people that we are friends with or people who support our cause are here, that they're helping us.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Dia the next question. So as a film director, what's been the impact of this film on you, on your life, and what kind of reception have you received because of this film?
Well, as far as sort of getting the film out into the world, the pandemic, we actually were fortunate because in a lot of ways our plans shifted, but they didn't get totally squashed in terms of the pandemic and what it's meant, because we were really always planning to kind of do screenings with community groups and try to partner with different people, in different cities who care about this issue. And so we've luckily been able to do that still fairly successfully. We're only a year into screening the film and showing it, but we've done, I think, like 16 partnered screenings. Film festivals obviously have also been trying to sort of recreate themselves and how you do it in the pandemic. And that's been a wonderful way to get, find people and hopefully then find people who will tell other people, oh, you should see this. And, we've been trying to play at, immigration conferences and just kind of anything that we could use to try to spread the word. So that's kind of the film wise. I mean, personally, I think it's just felt like a force for good in my life. Like one of the things that kind of blows my mind when you go hang out at the Casa is, this is like after 4 years of just like horrible news. And every time I read in the paper thinking about like, I have no hope, like it's all so awful. I think as you can tell from listening to any of these panelists, like you only, there is no story that doesn't, even when it's like breaking your heart about the trials that people are experiencing and the hardships and the journey that they take to get here, it is just leaves me with such a sense of hope to know that there's work that you can do, that small acts of kindness, whether it's financial donations or bringing a meal over to somebody's house or, just what Sarah had me the first time I met her. And she's like, oh, the first thing I always say is like, welcome to the US. I'm so glad you're here. And just like, oh, that just is like, what more do you need to know that every day, if you, look for how can I help and what can I do, that it changes people's experiences. So I've loved this. I have loved being able to talk to different groups who are figuring out how can we serve these communities. It's been amazing to know, oh, it's not just Casa de Paz, and it's not just this one community. There's people in every city that understand that all of our communities are better when all of our members are being cared for. So even, just today listening to you talk, it's like, oh, of course, like refugee kids trying to deal with this pandemic, like what a need for, finding mentors. It's incredibly inspiring. So.
Thank you. Sarah, I actually have a very technical question. Do you have a full-time job? How does this fit into your life? How have you transitioned the work? How has it grown, and how does that how does that work? Do you live in the house?
Yeah. Well, when we shot the film, I did have a job and I did live at the house. This past summer, the company that I worked for merged with another company and they laid off all of the part-time staff. So that was me. And I couldn't go to work full time because I needed the time to be able to do CASA stuff. So I am working on creating the ability for now, maybe I could get paid to do what I do at the CASA. And this could be my focus. And then as far as living at the house, I actually no longer live at the house. My brother, a couple of years ago, was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer, stage 4 cancer. And at that time I was living at the Casa and he lived about an hour away. And so I moved to be about halfway in between the casa and where my brother lived so that I could spend more time with him. And I'm still close to the casa. So I now live in an apartment with my sister, and having your family as your roommate is, or my sister as my roommate, is awesome because she's also my best friend. So wherever I go, it seems like I get to live with really cool people.
Also, but Oliver and his wife live at the casa, and he's still the lead host at this point, and their beautiful daughter, Kylie. And then about 9 months to the day after our last frame of footage was shot, they actually welcomed another child into the world, and they named her Sarah. And she's the cutest thing ever.
Yeah, when I found out, like I was actually, it's kind of an intense story. I was at the border when baby Sarah was born. I was at the El Paso, Texas, Mexico border for an event called the 3-Minute Hug. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that event. It's once a year. There are nonprofits in El Paso that work with Border Patrol, and they essentially open up the border, a small section of the border, for only 3 minutes. And then that allows families on both sides to come together and hug each other, like just actually give each other a hug for only 3 minutes. These are folks that do not have the ability to go back and forth across the border. And my friend was there to take photos of that event, and he invited me down. And of course I said yes. So I was there in this moment watching families hugging each other, which was already extremely emotional. And then my mom sent me a picture of baby Sarah, and she said, hey, zoom in on the name tag on baby Sarah's little, I don't know what they call it, a baby box, like where she was sleeping. And I zoomed in and it said Sarah, and I thought it was a joke. Like I thought they were pranking me. And I was like, haha, that's funny. And then they're like, no, like her name is really Sarah. And I seriously like got weak in my knees. I had to sit down. I thought I was going to faint. Whew, no pressure, right? Like having a kid named after you.
Well, if everyone in the audience isn't crying yet, that might have just done it.
Oh,
I was there. I'm just trying not to cry, but this is absolutely incredible.
she's super cute too.
Well, I was going to ask if each of you could share maybe one of the most moving stories of an individual or a family that you've worked with. As we head into the last quarter hour here, I would advise people to maybe grab some tissues. If we could start, Sister, could we start with you, since you've, I think, been at this sort of the longest?
Right away, what came to my mind, I wasn't expecting that question, but an experience that I had that there was a family in our area, and the father was arrested. He is undocumented. He was the father of a family with 3 children. One of them was paraplegic, and depending completely on the parents to get him in and out of bed, to do everything, to feed him, to take care of him completely. The other was a girl, a high school student, and the third was a little 10-year-old boy. So I went with them to the ICE office, and the bishop came with me when he was to get a decision on his request for asylum, and to be able to stay here. It was denied, and he was told that he had to get a plane ticket to go back to Mexico, and so the day came, despite all the efforts that we made, and that was going on for a long time, representation, everything. Tremendous support letters, a good man, had a wonderful job, worked full-time, responsible for this family. And I think one of the hardest days for me, I went to the airport to be with the family as he was leaving. And watching that man walk away from his family and leave them behind was a sorrow that really, I can't even describe. It was awful. And holding on to the little boy who just could not understand where his father was going. So I think that's a sad story. I have many happy ones, but when you say what was the most profound feeling, I've had wonderful feelings of joy, but that sadness was very real.
Thank you. Masha, can we please hear from you?
I need to, a second. Yeah, I mean, you know, I can tell a lot of stories. I think, and I wanted to go back to when I first spoke, it's about empathy. And this is all what we do. It's about empathy. It's about seeing other people, as human beings who are in horrible situation. You know what? I spoke once with someone who was on completely opposite spectrum of where I am with my understanding of the world and everything that we do. And I went back to history when the operation that was called Kindertransport happened in Nazi Germany, when the parents were allowed to put their kids on the train and get them taken from Germany to England. And those parents, most of them perished. They never saw their kids. And the person was Jewish who I was talking about this. And I was absolutely stunned that they didn't see the parallel with what's happening with the kids in those countries and how the parents need to make a choice to send their kids away because there is no guarantee that they will survive. And this is all we do. Like, you have the empathy that we feel for the people that we serve, the people that we bring here to Cleveland, to Columbus, to Toledo. Each person had so much sadness and trauma. You would not flee your country just because you want to. You would not come out as gay just because what? What's the point of doing that if people really don't have a choice? So, and, you know, we had a program that we helped victims of torture, for example, for 3 years. And we had to, you know, help our staff to not burn out just because of the stories that we hear. So, and with today's announcement that we are not bringing more refugees, at least till October, and this is all about humans. This is not the numbers. That are people who are waiting, who are in the pipeline, who have been vetted, who are waiting to reunite with their loved ones. These are people. And that's very sad.
Thank you. And I will say, we all can make choices, right, to help in one way or another. Dia's way is through art, through film. Sarah's way was, you know, having a profound experience and following that calling. Your way, as simple as it might be, is to vote.
Mm-hmm.
You know, help people register to vote. So there's something all of us can do to help. in small ways and in big ways. Thank you. Sarah, would you like to share a story?
Sure. I will actually just share not the most profound story, but it is a story that happened today, actually. One thing that I wanted to mention is that during COVID, we realized that when you're locked in a prison, you're 3 times likelier to contract the virus. And when we started understanding that, we were like, uh-oh, we don't want people to have to like be wandering, looking for a volunteer. Sometimes they would have to go back into the lobby and wait for a volunteer to come pick them up. And so we actually purchased a van and we converted it to sort of be like a little living room area. And there's some benches and a table and some shelves, and we call it Casa on Wheels. And our Casa on Wheels is parked right outside of the gates of the detention center, so that as soon as somebody is released, the volunteer waiting in the van is there to give the person a warm welcome. And then we can help them figure out, their next steps. Maybe they have family in town, they're calling, the family is going to come pick them up, or maybe they need to get to New York or to Ohio or wherever. And this afternoon, a gentleman was released from the detention center, and I'm just going to read the little paragraph that our volunteer texted us when he got out. He said, Yvonne was so much work. I got the van all warmed up before he arrived. He got in. 3 minutes later, his wife arrived. He was only locked up for 2 days, and they acted like it was 2 years. They looked like hometown dates on The Bachelor when the girl has to do that obligatory run and jump onto the guy. Very sweet. So as we were talking, today that happened, that this gentleman got locked in a prison for 2 days, which I never been locked in a prison for 2 days. I can't imagine. And that's probably the shortest amount of time I've ever heard someone being detained. Most folks that I know have been detained for about a year. I've met people who've been detained for 5, 6, 7 years. But just to know that he's with his wife right now, and they're back together again, I'm really happy for them.
Thank you very much. And Dia, would you like to share a story of how, a story that's impacted you through the process of working on this film and in showing it around the country?
Yeah, I mean, most of my stories are basically what you just heard from Sarah, like daily check-ins, and just, there's never a shortage, I think, of things that are happening at the Casa, whether or not it's, it's just always so lovely to hear about people who make it to their final destination, and the gratitude. Sarah will find like $20 bills hidden under the pillow, and people just are so grateful, or she gets letters, weeks and months and years afterward with people sending donations. Thank you so much for being there. So I don't have a ton of like personal stories to share, although every night that I've spent at the Casa, the stories are emblazoned in my brain because they're just so beautiful, of people, and they're so simple, and it's the person next to you on the bus,
Yeah, what about the shoes?
Oh, the shoes. The best thing we filmed that didn't make it into the film is, as you could tell from the film, the industrial area that the prison's in is not very hospitable. You kind of, it's very disorienting. They don't even let the people who are being released out the front door. They let them out the back now, which is like even more confusing. And then they're on this, it's a very weird spot to walk around. And even if you know the city and you know where you are and where you're going, but there is a gas station a few blocks away. So a lot of people end up at the gas station, and the family that owns it is very welcoming. And so the Casa will get calls, hey, we have people here who need a ride. There's also a Sikh temple north of Denver that a lot of people will go through, and they also help people get to their destinations and help them get settled. So on one of the nights that we were filming, there was a gentleman, Manu, who was from India. And, we, as part of the rounds, the volunteers pick people up from the detention center and then drive around the neighborhood, because we often, they find people walking the streets, and then also stop at the gas station to see if anybody's ended up there during the day. And so we stopped and the guy walked in. The gas station's run by an Indian family, and this guy, DK, who is no longer there, he actually left the US and went to Canada. But he's just a fantastic person. And so he was there and I was like, oh, can you help me with translation to tell this guy what's going on? And he was lovely, but he said to the guy, he gave him water, he gave him a jacket because it was cold. We shot in December. And, he's like, do you need anything? And the guy said, well, do you have any shoelaces? Because they take your shoelaces away when you're in prison so you don't hurt yourself with them. And he looked over the counter. I said, well, what size feet do you have? The guy told him, and DK took off his shoes, his very nice shoes, I might add, and said, here you go, take these. And then we walk, he walked out and he said, I have a backup pair of tennis shoes in my truck. And so he went and grabbed those, and it was just so beautiful. But yeah, the news of today of the numbers staying at 15,000 instead of, 60,000 refugees being accepted, it's like, I just can't weigh the sadness of, each of these stories. That's like, can't do math while I'm talking on a panel, but 45,000 people, that like, just those stories that just would that deserve to be here and deserve a chance of creating a life.
We hopefully maybe in October they will raise the numbers, but the thing here is like every day counts.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe they had a reason, maybe I don't want to go in there, but there was a promise, and promise was broken, unfortunately.
Well, and I think our work is cut out for us in terms of, let's call representatives, let's get the word out that this is not okay. It's not what we want. It's not acceptable. It's not how people should be treated. There are policy decisions that we want to push. And I'm not an expert in this, but certainly if anybody is, or
we just got an email from Hayes that that's what they're gonna do, and we all will do.
If anyone's interested in some of that work, I'm happy to direct people to resources, globalcleveland.org. You can find all of our contact information there. We are happy to connect you with groups that do a lot of that work. This has been an incredible panel. I just want to say my deepest debt of gratitude for Dia for stepping up and making the film, and for Sarah for agreeing to let her story be told in this way, and for following her heart. And to Masha and to Sister Rita, who live this work, who are this work every day. To my colleague Supriya on the behind the scenes here, who is an immigrant herself, who's worked very hard to be able to stay here. And to all of us who benefited from our families making this trek in the past. And to the film festival for picking incredible films every year to showcase and for us to move our hearts and to move our world. Art is, a different way of seeing the world, and we all benefit from artists who change the world in this way. So thank you to the film festival. And if you haven't seen the film, you can use the Global to get $1 off the ticket. Please see it. Please enjoy some of the other films that are also sponsored by great organizations here in Cleveland. And I just, again, want to express my gratitude to everyone on here and to everyone who is watching.
Thank you so much to Global Cleveland for sponsoring the screening of Welcome Strangers. This is everything about why we made this movie, was to be able to participate in events like this.
And I wanted to thank you for making this movie, because it was too short for me.
I know, as we're talking, I'm like, there's so much more.
With all these people, this is,
That's right.
I would love to have it at least 20 minutes more or something.
Yeah, well, maybe there's some wonderful films I can put type in the chat, some other resources, but absolutely. I mean, maybe there's certainly so much more of this story to be told. So.
And I know if anyone's interested in stepping up and creating a CASA-like house here, I know Sarah would be more than happy to help guide and give her advice and wisdom on this topic. And thank you again, everybody. I am going to conclude today's panel, this evening's panel. Have a great weekend, everyone, and be well. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.